at it at a all projects, we select projects based on how long they've been operating. So as long as every project that has been running for at least 12 months will be subject to the QPSC. So there's quite a few newer projects who aren't in that 12-month period yet. You kind of get by without having to do that at the moment, but it's good just to kind of be aware of what the process looks like. So the review period that we are selecting, have selected, should I say, is a rolling 12 months instead of doing it a true quarterly thing. So, for example, this last quarter was quarter one of the calendar year 2025, which then the dates range is 4/1 of 24 to 3/31 of 25. So and you can see it's the 12 months, but it's a rolling 12 months. I know there's been a few people that I've talked to at different agencies asking why we're doing a rolling 12 months instead of just true quarters. The main reason is because a rolling 12 months allows for more up-to-date view on performance, as well as being able to track trends. Quarterly is amazing, and I have no problem helping agencies figure out how to do that themselves so that they can score themselves quarterly. It's very much a snapshot in time. It's not showing you changes that are actively happening. So that's where we have made the decision to go to quarterly. If for some reason we're starting to see that it's not as helpful, we'll always open a discussion of switching that to like a quarterly thing, mid time frame. So then scope of review. All the scores and weights of the scores are informed by the COC program NOFO and the Texas BOS COC priorities. These are subject to change every so often. So when like I think it's the 2026 NOFO, when that drops, there'll be different priorities and we'll update the scorecards to reflect that. So the reports that we use for the review, that's the APR reports we get from HMIS and then put them in through Sage. We use system performance measures reports through our HMIS system, as well as we pull a coordinated entry report from HMIS so we can utilize that to check coordinated entry statuses prior to enrollments. And then lastly, we use a BLI report from Sage. Other potential information that we typically will use for questions are examples of meeting community needs questions. Those are the 4 questions we had previously, asking how do your agency does X, Y, Z, and upload a document to support it. Information gathering questions. Sometimes that could look more like one-on-one meetings when we're asking specific questions to agencies, just to get a clear understanding on the scores so that we can properly reflect it in our scorecards. In most cases, these could be scored or not scored. Most times, if it's just information gathering questions, it's not a scored component. It's just for us to put notes on the scorecard to document the rationale for things. And finally, we do utilize the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. However, this is only reserved for the competition scorecard and not for the quarterly scorecards. And as noted, we do use it in the general administration, which is considered section 10 of the scorecard. As many of you know, there's only 9 sections. Unless you're DV, there's only 8. And that's because we've removed the general administration from this scorecard. So the different components of the scorecard. So there are 9 components. Well, now there's 8. Yeah, 9 components for the scorecards. And just to briefly go through them, scorecard categories: targeting hard to serve. This is specifically looking at homelessness status. Unsheltered homeless is primarily what we're looking for, as well as individual having no income at entry. Then access to income. This is essentially to stayers. We're looking at people who are in your program for at least the annual assessment, so 1 calendar year. We're looking for increases in earned income, non-employment income, and then a combined increase or maintained total income from all sources. Section 3, same thing, that's access to income levers. This one specifically just focused on people who exit from the program both positively or negatively. Again, it also looks at earned income increases to non-employment, and then a combined increased or maintained total income. Section 4 is housing stability. So we're specifically looking at documents or the SPM on how many people successfully exit the program, meaning they've exited to permanent housing. Section 5, this is the rate for return to homelessness. We're looking at a 2-year percentage of how many people returned to homelessness in the last 2 years, and then also looking in the last 6 months and in the last year as well. Number 6, I'm just going to do briefly on because there is another section where we dive into this one a little bit more. This is just looking at things like how quickly you can house somebody once they enter your program, your utilization rates, as well as a SOAR component question where we're just measuring, do you have a SOAR trained person or access to a SOAR program? And then 7 is cost effectiveness. I'll actually touch on that in a moment. 8 is the HMIS data quality. This is essentially where we're looking at errors in your data entry, as well as any missing financial assessments at project entry, and annual assessments, or project exit. And we also look at timeliness of HMIS data. And then the last one, well, the second to last one is coordinated entry. This is where we're looking to see our enrollments into the projects coming from the coordinated entry system. And finally, the 10th one, like I mentioned before, general administration is not currently in the quarterly scorecard. It's only saved for the competition scorecard.
Thanks, Jesse. And these scorecard, there's the scorecard in all these sections. We do a lot over years, and through consultation, there's been a lot of research and development through just the evolution of the scorecard that you see before you and what we utilize that came all the way to FY24 competition. And most of this is based off of requirements, as we mentioned, by HUD that we are required to measure, but then also many of them come from our priorities as a COC, are the things that we want to measure to be able to move our COC overall to becoming more competitive, to hopefully maximize the amount of funding that we can be able to get. As a COC, just a reminder, we're not at 100% yet of the amount of funding that we can receive. Since we're 214 counties, we're much different than a single county of like trying to maximize that funding, because just how vast our geography is. There's a lot of complications to it. But as we are measuring this performance as an overall COC, we're hopefully continuing to move ourselves. I don't know if hopefully y'all saw in the updates that we had with the conditional awards that we actually did see a 27% increase compared to FY23, and had a lot of new grantees. As long as things continue to pan out, we're seeing things slowly trickle. And just to let you know, if you ask questions, we have a whole lot of updates for you, unfortunately. But things are trickling through on grants as far as we're seeing and understanding. And we saw really great success compared to it. So it's important for us to continue to measure these priorities. So one of those is meeting community need. We just want to be able to mention just a couple of changes of what we're doing with the quarterly performance scorecard versus what you might have been used to with competition. We did, for a couple of reasons, remove the 4 questions where we were having y'all provide your feedback of mentioning, different things you're doing towards meeting specific priorities that we have as a COC. We're going to incorporating people with lived experience and so forth. Due to a lot of changes with the grant agreements and us continuing to determine what a lot of this means, that's one reason why these questions are kind of on pause at the moment. But then also, those questions weren't necessarily intended to ask every single quarter. Is really focused on competition and seeing what you do. So if we bring those questions back, it's not necessarily going to be every single quarter. You might just see some fluctuation, but we'll always keep you up to date on any changes that come with additional meeting community questions that we might be asking based on our COC priorities. Also, SOAR, just because we're in transition, Hope was the SOAR lead. Dusty has been taken over as the SOAR lead for our continuum of care. And so just through that transition, all we've been measuring is just if you have access to SOAR in your project. And that cannot, yeah, and just to answer your question, if you have, what we're looking for there is that your source isn't just the Social Security Administration or even THN, but that your source is an actual dedicated partnership that you have where you know that there's a name, there's someone that you know of that you can get your participants in contact with. So if it's somebody on your staff that's SOAR certified, you got it. Or if it's an external partnership that you have where there is a dedicated SOAR connection that you know you can directly send one of your participants to get that SOAR access. That's what we're measuring in that particular metric. All right, Dustin, go to the next slide. I think the next one's yours.
So section 7, cost effectiveness. So this one's sometimes more complicated for agencies to wrap their head around. I know it was complicated for me when I first joined THN as well. So with cost effectiveness, we're looking at how well the grant funds are being used in relation to successful exits, as well as how much funding is left on the table that wasn't used. The specific area that does cause confusion for a lot of people is how we choose which grant to look at and use for the grant site for the scoring cycles. So essentially, we use the most recently closed out grant in Sage. And what we mean by closed out grant is once you've submitted your APR to HUD in Sage, HUD's reviewed it and HUD has accepted it. That is considered a closed out grant. I know sometimes if that's not there, then we typically will use the most recent closed out. So that could be a year ago. In some cases, it's using the fiscal year 2021 because they haven't accepted your most recent submission to say in Sage. I know a lot of people get confused as to why since it's using such an old grant, some old grants for current performance. Well, one is because we're not necessarily following your grant cycles. We're not even following our grant cycle when it comes to scoring. We're following a calendar year. So the grant will not be perfect except for I think one or two agencies follow a calendar year. And in some cases, when we're using the older ones, simply because if HUD rejects the submission, it gives you opportunity to fix any errors and correct it. Which then, if we don't realize you've made corrections, we could result in giving you a not up to date score, which would not be helpful. So we use the older completed grants just to make sure there's no changes that can occur from there. Section. Oops, sorry, Billy.
Oh yeah, that one's yours too. Sorry, Dusty.
So Section 9 and Section 8 for those who are VSPs is coordinated entry participation. I know there's been a lot of issues around this section since our last quarterly performance scorecard where we started noticing some errors in the report we ran. So I, as well as the data team, created a brand new report, which I'll show you in a second, to look at the most recent coordinated entry enrollments that is more up to date, and we don't punish you for having missed enrollments that date back to 7/1 of 23. And those individuals, especially if you're in rapid rehousing, most likely are gone now and aren't in your program. So you're not being held accountable negatively for things from two or more years ago. So let me open this up real quick and show you. I will warn you, it is fairly complicated. So this is a document that we will not. Can you all see my screen still, or did that just stop?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So this is a document we will not share with you. We will not send this to anybody. It's an internal report that we run at THN, and the main reason is simply because the amount of protected information that's included. Because we pull the entire CE data from our entire geographical area, not just your areas that you serve. So we won't share this. We will, however, share it. We'll let you look at it in like debrief meetings with one of us. But we won't show you certain areas. So just to walk you through it, this right here is the actual percentage that we use to see how many people are enrolled in coordinated entry prior to your housing enrollments. So this is the primary one that's important for most people. We then enter our report start date. So whenever we update to the new quarter, we're going to change this date to 7/1 of 24. And that's when the system will start doing VLOOKs up. This will start doing VLOOKUP for us to gather the information. This is where we put all the protected information, client names, and all that here. And then this is where we're going to put your agency's APR information in here. And then these two reds, basically it just cleans up the data to make it easier to read and interpret. The last tab here, the last tab is not as important for anything. It's just more cleanup to make it a little easier. But this tab tells us a majority of all the individuals who were enrolled with yes, no's. Typically, I know I've had a few conversations saying that, oh, no, we've enrolled everybody into coordinated entry. What I do is I will put their HMIS number in the notes section of the section on the scorecard, so that way you can look it up yourself. And we do double check when we see no's, especially since this is a new report. We're still trying to iron out all the kinks. I don't believe we ran into any issues yet of where it's been wrong. So, but if you have questions, you're like, oh no, we did do this right, just reach out to us. We will gladly double check the report or triple check it, and then share with you the HMIS numbers.
Thanks, Dusty. And just as and again, just to reiterate, what for our goal again, our priority is CE coordination compliance and active participation. And so we are measuring, the CE enrollments are occurring prior to the project enrollments. And so, yeah, we appreciate that. And before Marcel does his part, I just want to mention real quick, because we didn't say this, but the scoring, as opposed to competition, because in competition, you're used to us publicly sharing the scores and the priority listing and all of that. That's not the purpose of quarterly performance scorecards. The scores that you receive through this particular monitoring strategy are not going to be publicly posted. They're internal. We keep track just so we can kind of compare and kind of see the trajectory that things are going, and be able to support and help y'all. And it's just really, again, for that collaboration and proactive process that we can work together on. And so we completely understand that each and every one of you are wanting to maximize your score as much as possible. And that's what we want too. But really, we understand that everybody has different nuances, and sometimes just the raw score is not necessarily going to be telling the whole story of what you're experiencing. And so that's why this routine basis is so helpful for us to identify these things. So one example of things in scoring feedback that we're looking into, that we're going to ask a question later on, is access to income. We hear a lot of people talking about with their access to income just stayers. If you're a project, especially a rapid rehousing project, that is having most of your participants that are in the program for less than 1 year, there's a possibility that there's not really anywhere that you can go with that particular metric towards getting a score. And keeping things as objective as possible, and equitable as possible, we're looking for those ways to, how can we measure this in a way where it's fair and works for everybody? So through feedback, sometimes there are particular metrics where we have allowed partial points if it's something that doesn't necessarily apply to your project at a particular moment. We've also done another method of removing that question altogether. If we can objectively determine that that particular metric does not apply to your project for that given review period. And so these are the things that we think about and look at and say, okay, so in this regard, maybe you've seen your scorecard before where we kind of thrown out a question, if you will, and just remove that altogether from the total score because it's not applying. Or it's, of course, we do it for everybody if there's an error on our part that occurs. So this is a question we're going to ask you a little bit later, is like, if you've seen on your scorecard those two methods of we've used both on a scorecard, but other times we've just done one of either throwing out a question if it doesn't apply to you or allowing for partial points. And what we have determined on our teams, we feel like it's more objective possibly to just throw the question out altogether rather than trying to determine half partial points or something like that. That's doesn't necessarily benefit everybody as well as we think it could. So we might ask that question in a bit, but just want to give you that context of some of the things with the scorecard that we're looking at in this proactive and routine process to gather what we can to be able to always be looking at how we can be improving the process overall. So speaking of the process, we'll move on to Marcel to kind of take us through the timeline.
Good morning, everybody. I'm just going to go over the quarterly performance scorecard process. So for starting off in week 1, THN, we pull all data reports. Of course, with VSPs, they required to pull their own data, and then they'll email to Dusty or I, so that way we can complete the scorecards. Projects completed application in SurveyMonkey. Apply for each applicable project, including the QPSC recipient response task. So just be sure in SurveyMonkey that you are completing that, and just make sure you complete for each program that you have. So if you only have one, you should only have one in the system. If you have 2, make sure you have 2. So that way we can make sure we have a scorecard for each task. During weeks 2 and 3, THN staff completes the scorecard. So during that week, those 2 weeks, we are completing all your scorecards. Therefore, that means that everybody has to either send their VSP scorecards or we have pulled all reports. So we're completing those during those weeks. Dusty, you go to the next slide, please. During week 4, completed scorecards and reference reports are uploaded to SurveyMonkey. Recipients are notified that scorecards are ready for review. So we'll send out an email to say, hey, we're completed. Go ahead and review. And then after you review it, if you feel like, hey, I don't agree with this score, I have questions regarding the score, you can always put into SurveyMonkey, and then we'll review it as a team or individually, and then we'll respond to you for any to notify you that we received it and give you any feedback that we receive from our team. During weeks 5 and 6, THN staff reviews disputed items and finalize scorecards. So as of yesterday, or as for me, early this morning, because my system was messing up, we finalized the scorecards and we updated and uploaded, and then you will be notified that the final scorecard is there. And then we have a debrief, which is what we're doing right now. It's strongly encouraged to discuss scorecard and provide feedback potentially required. If any of you have a score that's below 70%, then we'll definitely be doing a follow-up and feedback to see what we can do to assist, or I'll come up with a plan to help you increase your score for the next quarter.
And real quick, Marcel, let me mention real quick with this one on the finalized scorecard. Y'all, what we plan on doing is that just even for your side, because I know sometimes you're not always sure if there's a particular thing that you're needing to respond to or act to. For when you get the initial scorecard, there's a possibility you decide not to do anything. Our hope is that you take the time to review the scorecard and actually see if there's anything that you would contest or if things that we can talk about together in a debrief. But at that point in the process, you're not necessarily required to. We're going to strongly encourage you to be a part of the rest of the process. But if you do contest your scorecard, that's where you'll get a finalized scorecard after we review it, whether we end up changing anything or not. If we do, and we'll provide a rationale in the notes column for whichever decision is made based on what you contested. If you don't contest the scorecard, our plan is that the initial scorecard will have been the finalized scorecard that you receive. We're not going to upload an additional finalized scorecard if you did not contest anything. Hopefully that makes sense. And then we'll just reach out to you, and if you haven't already reached out to us, to see if we can schedule a debrief meeting and so forth, especially if you score below 70%, as Marcel said. All right, thanks, Marcel.
And then Q&A. So, got any questions? We are here. We have time. I think we have about a little over 20 minutes left to answer any questions and give you a response or feedback that we may have.
Yeah. So to get the ball rolling, I mean, bring that question back to the group that I just had started mentioning a moment ago. So this idea of throwing out a question and removing it from the total allowed points for the overall scorecard versus allowing for partial points. So there's 3 examples that we normally can think of. The third one, all of a sudden, I'm kind of drawing a blank on. So y'all can help me, but 2 for sure is the one that I mentioned: access to income for stayers. I think I remember the third one. So access to income for stayers. Sometimes you may not have any participants in the review period that have made it to the requirement of an annual assessment. And so that could be a situation where all of a sudden maybe that metric truly does not apply to your project for that particular review period. Another example was when we do the general administration section, there is a question where we ask if you have been subject to a single financial audit, and then if yes, have you had any late submissions addressing findings? And forgive me if I'm butchering the question, but it's kind of a 2-part question, to where if you don't have any, really what we're looking for there is rewarding, because it's not a bad thing to get a single financial audit, right? So we're not going to punish you because you don't have a single financial audit, but we want to reward you if you were subject to a single financial audit and were compliant in addressing any findings and not having any late submissions. And so you get full points if you did have a single financial audit and you had no late submissions, but you only get partial points if you didn't have a single financial audit. So hopefully that makes sense, but that's one of those situations again where is it more helpful to give partial points in a situation that, or if you were not subject to a single financial audit, seeing it more as, okay, this does not apply to your project for this particular review period. And so that question is just is gonna be zeroed out and not apply to the total score of the scorecard. Another one, the third one in the is system performance measures. If you can remember on the scorecard, you can get, we're looking at any returns to homelessness in the past 2 years, 12 months, and 6 months. And there's an option for an NAN, which means not applicable at the time. I think is basically what it means. And so you get partial points if it's just NAN on the SPM reports. And then you either get 0 points or full points depending on the percentage, if there is a percentage that's there. So that's another one where NAN is kind of saying this metric does not apply for this period. So that's just 3 examples for y'all where we've used both methods before. My wife is a teacher. I was asking her, and she said, I've found that it's better just to throw it out if it doesn't apply to the group. So that's one question for the group. We love to get your feedback if y'all have any feelings on one way or the other on that. Of throwing out a question if it doesn't apply to your project for that review period versus allowing partial points. Oh, no, you won't have to put anything, Amanda, for the, we just look at the SPM report. So that's going to be automatic. We just pull a report that's going to automatically show us. It's going to be pulling, as long as your data is all up to date and everything. That's why we always encourage y'all to keep your data up to date, because we're pulling those reports and we're going to just objectively pull what is showing on the report. So it just tells us automatically NAN. And we can show, if you look, we share those reference materials in SurveyMonkey Apply. If you want to look at the actual standard SPM, is it normally what it's titled? And you can kind of see the difference there where it states a percentage or NAN. And you're allowed to come off of mute too, if y'all want to come off of mute, but and the floor is open for additional questions too, but I just want to put that question to the group to hear if any of y'all had any feelings one way or the other on us addressing those particular situations.
Hey, Billy, I have a question about, and I don't remember actually. I'm sorry, I should have the scorecard in front of me, but I don't. I had it printed out sometime and then I
No
don't know
problem.
where it is. I was trying to frantically look for it. But does the scorecard measure the effort that the agency staff are making, kind of compared to the success rate of the clients, succeeding in the program? And the reason I'm asking is because I felt like, and I could be wrong, but I felt like when I first read over that was something that I felt like was missing, um was the like kind of effort that we're making being measured and shown, and our progress in that way. I don't even know exactly how that would be measurable necessarily through this data, but compared to the like success rate of whether or not people were getting more income or staying in their housing, not becoming homeless again, etc. Because I think that should be, I don't think that the measurement should be solely on the success, I'm going to call it, of the clients or the progress of the clients, because especially ours, well, I guess anyone in a homeless situation, are, going through trauma. And I think to be trauma informed in this way of like not making it so that we're just measuring our program and our uh, successful percentage or whatever on just the success rate of the clients. I just don't, I just want your feedback about that, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great question, Andrea. I think, as far as we see on our side, some of that's built in there. We kind of have the two different sides of this of the tension that we have of having to of trying to make the process as fair as possible across the board. Having to use objective um, measures as much as possible. So some of that, your question that you have there, I think there can be ways for us to maybe measure that more. I think it's built in places where if we hunkered in more and kind of dug into a few of them, we'd be able to identify ways that's those things are being measured through the process of the project and the success of things. But then also, there's room for stuff like that. I think, Andrea, that we could discuss and look at, and that's where, I mean, if you had ideas of um, where you identify a particular like strategy, for example, with meeting community need questions, we were kind of trying to address that a little bit. Like, hey, what are the things that you're doing within your projects to meet these certain kinds of needs? Where necessary, you're not, sometimes the objective reports, things can be beyond your control every once in a while. But what is in your control is where obviously we're asking, okay, what particular steps do you take to address this particular need in your community? And then we kind of left it open for y'all to check that and kind of I think we just had made the decision to unlock the points. You provide data evidence, document evidence of one of the items that you select, but then just kind of take y'all's word for it for the rest of it. I'm just not sitting there saying, okay, prove to us that you're doing each and every one of these things in your project, but trying to find those ways. But
The other
certainly
thing,
the other suggestions.
oops, sorry, Billy. The other thing to think about is with that is HUD does not, I don't want to say doesn't care, because I think people at HUD do care about best efforts. They're not going to measure your performance on best effort, unfortunately. Unfortunately, that's kind of the field that we're in, that we could all do our jobs perfectly and still have a situation where back-to-back individuals, by their own choices, don't succeed. I'm sure we could do that with internally, but I just know that HUD is not going to look at that And a lot of what we've built here is based on HUD's own measurements that they are looking for what they would consider a successful project. Because that's the bare minimum that we need to make sure you all are meeting so that you can stay funded and not risk losing the funding through poor performance or something like that.
Yeah, John.
Oh, sorry. That's understandable. I just, I guess it's very similar to substance abuse programs that are funded, and that, like you were saying, Dusty, that the success rate isn't necessarily going to be dependent on the staff's efforts, and but the funding kind of depends on the success rate of the client. So it's I guess it's just kind of the business that we're in, like you said.
It sucks. I've been on the receiving end as both a therapist, shelter manager, housing case manager. I've done it all. I've had to deal with very bad outcomes with things outside of my control. Yeah, it's difficult. I'm sure internally we'll talk about it more to see what we can do to incorporate it in our stuff. It's just something just to be aware of. HUD doesn't necessarily care, unfortunately. Not to leave on a bleak note there. John, you had your hand raised.
Oh yeah, I was just listening. Thank you guys first and foremost for today's meeting. And then I had a quick question. It was in regard, because I know we are a little bit low on this the last couple of quarters. For section, I believe it's 6.1 regarding like being housed within 30 days. I was just going to kind of echo, I know we're already on the topic of it, I guess, generally speaking, in regards to things outside of our control, which I think is poignantly what you'd said, Dusty. Like, that's kind of, there's just some things we can't control. We have multiple different barriers on trying to get an individual housed, especially I think it's compounded on if they have poor criminal history, credit history, rental history, on top of our own internal barriers of our organization only being able to provide these payments in a certain amount of time, then compounded by if the individuals that are the next candidates off the HPL and we're filling that vacancy and helping determine their eligibility determination, once enrolled, if they have no ID, social security card, or birth certificate, many of those are, identifiers to help with the lease applications to getting them accepted. So it is a multi-step process. And I understand exactly what you guys just said in regards of like, it's not something that HUD cares about. Are they just get them in there, get them in 30 days, let's go.
Yeah.
So I was just saying that's one of the metrics I know specifically our program in the past has fallen short, because it's very difficult within that 30-day span of time with those different challenges I mentioned. But is that something that I guess even internally you guys would have mention of like, hey, these are the kind of barriers that this program is experiencing with, and it is case by case. I mean, there are some individuals that have some rental history or no criminal history whatsoever, and they have less barriers and their entry is much quicker and being able to house them. But with those anomalies, I guess, or those outliers, is that something to just kind of provide you guys information with or document on the scorecards? Or
I mean, you're doing a great job already, John. I mean, you've already started the first step of the process of just the analysis and identifying the gaps that could be the sources of the pain point, right? Like, there's and so much of this stuff can be, what can we solve that can be solved, right? That's within our control. And so that's why these debrief sessions that we encourage, we strongly encourage, and we're considering requiring, if you score under a certain percentage, again, not to be punitive, but for us to be more proactive. Y'all are busy, so let's go ahead and help, where we're gonna go ahead and schedule a meeting and get this going so we can have these conversations, say, okay, all right, this particular metric, here's the barriers that you're facing. Is there anything within our control that we can identify with y'all where we can address this and help make it happen? Maybe we find out that the coordinated entry system that's in your community is maybe causing a snag where it's adding to the days, or maybe we identify that, and we're trying to COC wide determine ways that we can support y'all as well, like developing a landlord recruitment strategy that might be able to be replicated and scaled across the whole continuum of care. Right? Nothing's a silver bullet, because all y'all have different communities and you face your own challenges. And as I realized from the EHP program, each of y'all are dealing with a very specific property culture. All of y'all's landlords, depending on what area of Texas you're in, your landlords are different and they want different incentives. They want different securities. They feel different risks, and that's real. It makes it hard for us COC wide to find things out. But these are the things that we're doing in the background too, to try to help find those ways. Okay, now let's sit down. Here are the specific barriers you're facing. What can we, let's strategize here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I was just going to add a little thank you, and I greatly appreciate that. What I was also going to mention, another barrier that just literally came to mind, is even with the expediency of doing everything and getting them and applying and getting the administrative and application fees, is then often you run into, and you're absolutely right, every single property is so different. The other caveat that we tend to find also is even after all the acceptance, they're ready to work with us, they're ready to house them. If there's not a make-ready unit for another couple of weeks, that's also factored. It's like, oh, we did all the right processes. We did it with expediency and speed. You don't have a unit that's not even available until next month? Okay, okay. So anyways, but yes, I thank you for that. And yeah, I think it is a continual conversation and dialogue to have to be able to express those things. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I also want to mention this, y'all. I know this isn't always helpful because I know that all of us want to maximize the scorecard, but our goal, y'all, is not always to get y'all to 100 because we understand that sometimes, in some cases, that's unrealistic, right? Because it's too hard with too many nuances. And so one of our strategies that we want to do in debriefs too is, okay, maybe we identify, like you're saying, John, right now you're in a moment where it's gonna be really hard to get this to 30 days or below. So where else can we really hone in and focus on that feels more like low-hanging fruit that can help offset some of the things too? So these are some of the things that we certainly want to be present to help you out too in these debrief sessions and strategizing of how, like, maybe that's what maximizing means is, okay, right now there's a lot beyond your control in this one. And we're seeing, okay, let's pause this one for a little bit and let's find some low-hanging fruits that's within our control that we can address quickly. They can already help offset and maximize in a different way. And so
I
those are,
completely. Oh yeah, I was gonna say I completely understand that. There is one that we take full responsibility for, which is like the timeliness, and that's definitely something that we have control over. So that particular section for our timeliness and data entry, it is just with as much going on. That's not an excuse, but that's something I think we can certainly focus on again, aside from the things we can't. So yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
oh, that's
I will
fine.
add to that as well. Like, so if you do have landlords that are, it may take a little bit longer. They'll be like, all right, 45 days. I don't think at the end of the day, when it's competition time or you're looking at reports, that you're going to really lose funding for waiting for somebody to get housed. I think the numbers look better that you are getting people housing, you are getting people off the street. So I would just say, look at that as a positive as well. And just to piggyback off of what Billy was saying, some of the cases, yes, I would look at some of these scores as far as like the low hanging fruit and maybe some of the case management piece, like taking priority to make sure the data entry is entering in there on time. Some stuff is a little bit harder, like increasing income and all those things. But if you can work on some of those low hanging fruit, it will benefit. But overall, like if a landlord is taking a little bit of time to get someone to house and you have everything documented and it's not, I wouldn't worry about it too much. The goal is to get the people off the street and get them housed, and I will look at that as a huge success on your end. I wouldn't stress too much about that.
Yeah, and maybe there could be a way, even Andrew, to your question, now that Marcel said it, maybe case management is a place where we can look at incentivizing case management strategies and practices, because that's some of the places where we can find ways to incentivize and reward some of the work you're doing in the background, maybe through. And so that just was an idea. Obviously, that's why these feedback sessions are helpful, is that maybe just even through the lens and focusing on the concept of case management, maybe there's something there that we can pull. Then kind of address the question you're bringing of, like, is there something else we can measure that's looking in the background? Like, okay, yes, the reports aren't necessarily showing the numbers, but here's the prices that we're doing where we're trying to do the work, and it's there. So that was just a thought that I had based on comments you were making.
Well, something a little more concrete for you, John, and anyone else who's struggling with this. First off, all those who I work with, I hope you know that I'll tell you straight up that I'm not, if I'm worried or not worried about something. And usually time to housing is something that I'm not necessarily worried with unless there's like 120 days or something outrageous, then it's something we should talk about. I'm already working with 2 different agencies on creating what I call a housing matrix to get basic baseline information from as many landlords and property management companies they could potentially get. And basically, it just asks the basic questions that you all would be asking them. What are your requirements for someone to move in? What is the rental amount? What is the security deposit? What is your application fee? Do you work with felons? If yes, what felonies do you work with? What credit score? Are you open to negotiate these requirements? So that way, when you get someone who comes into the program or for during the enrollment, and you know for the most part they're going to be enrolled, it's hey, here's a list for you um, that you can start looking for, so you can match with what would work with your unique background. That way, you're not doing the legwork every time for every person. And kind of jump starting that. So I'm technically only working on it with 2 agencies, and I want to not to expand it past 2 until I know it's ironed out and all the kinks get worked out. But I'm willing to share what I make sooner if anyone wants to test it themselves, and just report back to me kind of how it works so that I can make improvements on it as well.
Yeah. And in case somebody need to go, we have some time. We'll stick around if any of y'all want to stay with some other questions. I want to respect the time just in case any of y'all have another meeting at 12 or need to get going. And so just a couple of quick announcements. Please continue to notify us if you hear any updates from HUD. They don't always let us know. That's just even the normal one about if you get a monitoring, if you hear that you have a monitoring coming up, all that kind of stuff. Just please always notify us if you hear from HUD and keep us updated, because we ask to be copied, but that often doesn't happen, especially with your grants. If you're waiting for that to come, if you get your issues and conditions, those updates are very helpful for us to kind of get a good picture of kind of what's happening across the balance of state. I mean, please continue to reach out, y'all. Please take advantage of the debrief meetings with the quarterly performance scorecards. So these conversations like we're having right now can happen on a routine basis and regularly, where we can continue to work together. In August, we're planning on having a landlord engagement and recruitment strategy webinar. So kind of what Jesse's talking about, a housing matrix, all different ideas and strategies like this. We can talk about that. Hopefully it can be beneficial for y'all's projects in addressing some of these barriers that y'all face. But with that, we'll stick around for a few more minutes. If any of y'all have any continued feedback or questions, thank you for joining us. Thank you for participating in the process. I hope our goal at the end of the day, even though we live in this world of competition and limited resources, is that y'all feel supported and that we value your partnership, and we deeply, deeply, deeply appreciate all the hard work that y'all do on the ground. So thanks for joining us. And we didn't stop the recording, but if anybody else will stick around for a few more minutes.